Welcome back to Talk of the Town, brought to you by Uniquely Nelson. I'm Chris Butler, and alongside me is Simon Duffy, General Manager of Uniquely Nelson. Nice to have you here. And we're joined by one of New Zealand's most respected landscape photographers and actually conservationists, we would have to say as well. Craig Potton, nice to have you here.
Thanks very much. Good to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about the background? You did grow up in Nelson, is that right, Craig? So born and bred?
Absolutely, and I haven't gone very far in life. So I was born on the Tahuna hillside. Well, I was born in hospital, but within 24 hours on that hillside. And I think I've been in 5 houses ever since living on that hillside because it's so very beautiful.
Oh, isn't it?
You look out across, Tahuna Beach, the ocean, and then the mountains beyond. And you can almost say it prefigured my life because I love surfing. I love being in the ocean. I love mountain climbing. It's the Arthur Range beyond. And so what I saw out my window from the age of 0 on was what I really followed for the rest of my life.
So that was going to be my question, because people often talk about Nelson's natural landscape. So growing up with those views, was that where you got a bit of an eye for your photography and also potentially your environmental love?
Well, you can read backwards into things and not really know whether that actually was a cause per se, but it definitely goes back in my head. Not just in my head, and stories get apocryphal and stories get exaggerated into telling. But my mother said that even before I could walk, I used to crawl outside and get something like a lovely dead spider or a dead mouse or something and bring it back in and show it to Mum.
Right.
Look how beautiful this is, and she would not think it was as beautiful as I did,
No, that's right. Get it out of that.
Yeah, she would have a different reaction to the beauty of nature than I would. So I think I just was a very sort of what they call visceral or tangible. I love to touch and be out in nature. I just love to get my hands dirty and just, literally smell the earth right from apparently, so I'm told, this is before I could speak even, pre-literate age. I just love nature and it hasn't stopped.
It's interesting because you originally studied Eastern religion and English before moving into conservation. How did that journey shape your outlook as both an artist and an environmentalist?
Yeah, well, the question's not entirely correct in the sense that when I was at Nelson College, I got involved in conservation straight up, which was Save Manapōuri campaign.
Yep.
And part of that recognition at that time, and it was going through my head, that we weren't treating nature well, not just at Manapōuri, but everywhere. There was an environmental crisis in the 1970s. It was already known that if we put CO2 into the atmosphere, then we'd warm up the globe. And if we warmed up the globe, we'd get more storms. So everything is happening now.
And here we are today.
Yeah, here we are 50 years later saying, whoa, we didn't realize this was coming. We did. And I realized that even as a 15-year-old anxious sort of kid that was reading lots of books, that things were going wrong. So what I'm saying there, Simon, is that, I was concerned about the environment. Partly that, it's almost the question is the other way around, that led me to go to university to study philosophies that might have a better attitude to nature. So there was an idea that somehow in Christianity, which was the dominant sort of way of living that I'd been brought up in, that man was in charge of the universe, that God created this universe for humans, for you and me, and the animals were there for our taking, and the plants were there to give us oxygen, and it was all very functional for humans, but the rest of the place was made for us. Eastern philosophy doesn't see the world that way.
Right. No,
and I thought, well, that's wonderful. I will look into ways in which we can have a better, more empathetic relationship to nature.
A balanced one.
Both a balanced one, but also empathy. Why did I actually really care about animals and love them and feel that the beauty of the earth was important? Why are these things were going on in my adolescent, thoughtful head? I didn't have girlfriends. I had thoughts in my head in those days. I was anxious, and like a lot of adolescent kids are. And it was, well, what's the answer? Going to church on Sundays didn't sort of suffice for me, didn't do anything for me per se. Not that I'm saying or dishing church and value, but I'm really saying that nature gave something to me, a sense of meaning, a sense of place, and Nelson just gives it in abundance.
It's just more of a higher calling for you.
It's kind of that sounds a little bit sort of highfalutin almost. Like, well, I'm not going to, do the Church of Craig or anything. You've got to see it though as what's important in life. What's going to drive you? You know, my father was a very driven man. My mother was a very driven woman. So it's not surprising that I, you know, inherited that desire almost. And for me, it was, well, you know, let's get a better relationship to things that are beautiful, that we can love, that can be around us, not just human, but also creatures and plants and the world. It's a beautiful place. We're destroying it. How do we stop? We look at philosophies, we look at ways of life that are less intrusive on the earth. Now, there's a footnote to this, which it turns out that, you know, once you go to India, which I have, they don't actually treat their rivers any better than we do. You know, people can have great philosophies, great ideas, but they also can behave badly. You know, you can be a Christian and say, love your neighbor, but you can also sue them for building their fence too high and blocking your view at the same time. You know, so it's not straightforward, but it was those questions that drove me into philosophy.
So, you know, you talked about the fact that potentially you haven't gone that far. You've always been in Nelson, but in actual fact, you've travelled a lot, haven't you? So, you know, New Zealand, Antarctica, Himalayas, and, you know, you mentioned India there. So is there any particular place that has really struck you, you know, that you've had affinity with? I mean, we see a lot of New Zealand nature around here, but you've also been overseas. So what has stuck with you over time?
I mean, people do ask, you know, what's the highlight of your life, Craig, and questions like that, and they really are hard to answer, and they would change if you interviewed me tomorrow to some extent. You know, a couple I was thinking of this morning was I was in Nepal, in a lowland area of Nepal, and the Himalayas is a place that's very special to me because of Tibetan Buddhism and the philosophy of the people there and the sheer happiness of the people there. But I was there doing, through the New Zealand government, a book on the national park as a trade, sort of not trade aid project for them. And I was with a little Gurkha. I would say little, I mean, don't want to dish the vertically challenged, but it was not as tall as me. But he was an expert on the birds and I was photographing them. So he came along with me. We walked out in this 5 o'clock in the morning, this beautiful morning, to a dry riverbed, seeing the peacocks and the natural state and all the birds. And then this huge, great tiger just walked straight out of the bush on the other side of this dry riverbed. You know, it was only from here to the other side of the street here away. And when you see a tiger in the wild and you're with a Gurkha that's about 5 foot tall and you've only got the tripod and your camera, then I'm thinking, well, if I hold that tripod up, if he makes a charge, you know, no point in climbing a tree. They climb faster than you. There are moments like that that are extraordinary. I think another time in Antarctica, to give a sort of different feel of what really hits me too, was I was walking in the dry valleys of Antarctica, which is a very special place that few people get admittance to. And there'd been an American photographer, Elliot Porter, who had been there before me. I'd seen some of the images. I'd loved his work. He'd been very formative in the way I think about photography and create photographs. And I just walked up to this point, and I'm sure it was exactly where he took a photograph. You know,
just recognise.
Yeah, I just walked straight into that's where Elliot, who I'd never met, you know, he was a dentist in Maine before you know, when I was a kid. He was an 80-year-old dentist, but a wonderful photographer. And I think I just stepped onto the point where his tripod went down and he took that photograph. So it's a kinship with another artist.
Yes.
Here's an artist working. Here's me going down in the footsteps of Elliot Porter, and literally in the footsteps. So I stepped into his space and made a photograph, so there's too many moments to kind of, we don't have time.
No.
It would become tedious to others, but so many good moments.
Yeah. You published many acclaimed books and been involved in many exhibitions, not just here in Nelson, but, you know, worldwide. How do you see the role of photography in connecting people emotionally to conservation?
It's a hell of a question that artists have asked over a long period of time, and so, you know, it's not new for us to ask it today, but how much political message can you put into art? And there's famous instances with Picasso's painting of Guernica when the fascists bombed a Spanish village, you know, and blew it apart, and he painted a painting that he wouldn't let go back to Spain until Franco had gone. Until the dictator had gone. And it's a very heavy painting and a very sad painting, obviously, or Goya's painting of the failure to stand up to Napoleon's troops when they came through Spain. those are exceptions. I think most of the time artists should not attempt to bash people over the head with a consistent message. They should rather invoke a feeling of empathy and feeling around the issue. It's not to say that they shouldn't deal with important issues, but it's not the place of art. The place of that is politics. And I've been very involved in politics. All my life I've been involved in politics, because that's where you bring about social change. That's where you make legal changes to the law to look after whatever it is better or to be fairer. You don't do that through art, but what you do through art is give people hope, because it's beautiful, because at times we lose our hope. We think, how are we going to stop global warming? When you see what's happening with Russian oil these days, it's just getting splattered everywhere. You get those big problems in your head. You feel dreadfully anxious about the fact, and quite correctly, if you don't, you're not thinking properly, then art can be an antidote. It can be something that spurs you to recognize it's a beautiful world, both in relationships to people, if it's to do with people, to do with nature, and that can lift you to fight the good fight. And it can allude to what's going wrong, but it shouldn't hit you over the head with a hammer blow. That's it's not the place. When it does that, it becomes propaganda. There was an exhibition recently in the Sutra, no names, but it got close to propaganda. It sort of said, well, I believe very strongly the artist in this, those people that did these things in the past are wrong. I'll literally walk and spit on them. That doesn't work.
That doesn't work, yeah. So you would have to say, there's one word I'd say from what you've just said, you're an encourager of people to look at things, to when I said for them to infiltrate what you're presenting, for them to actually stop and think.
Where's
this all going?
And it
is a big subject, especially now.
It's huge now. I mean, just the way we're treating each other is very improper and disturbing at present worldwide, and even in New Zealand, we're sort of siloing into these little groups, whatever group you're in, and we're having a go at the others that, and we're feeling like we're victims, all of which is unhealthy, in terms of just getting on as a community and doing well. It's kind of an attempt to bring back art, that life isn't straightforward too. So we don't want an interpretation that someone just walks in and says, oh, that's what that means. That's the answer. Life isn't like that. It simply isn't.
There's a lot of grey, isn't there?
That requires tolerance. That requires empathy. That requires all the things which art can provide. But on top of everything else, I've never known why, but I'm just attracted to beautiful things. I don't know how to stress that, and many people have talked about it in different ways, none in a satisfactory way. What is beauty? Is it to do with symmetry? Is it to do with just the shape? Is it to do with, what you had for breakfast affects what you see out there today? We don't know. All we know is that it does affect us. It really affects us. So if we can, in this gallery, bring people in to see beautiful work, mine and others, task done.
Obviously photography, but also film and television has played a part in your life. Lord of the Rings, Rivers and Wild Coasts, and so how has that different medium affected you in the way that you tell stories? I mean, obviously you've continued with your photography, but film and television's, it's live and moving, isn't it?
It is. And you've hit the nail on the head with those two words. It's live and it's moving, and you can't go back. You can edit, obviously, but essentially you have to tell a story, or a narrative is art language. It's got to be from A to B through C. So you have to have a sequence. Whereas when you're looking at a painting or a photograph, in other words, a still work that I'm working with, there doesn't have to be a sequence. You can go forward, you can look into it and think, that's what it was like when I was a kid at the beach here. I'm looking at now at a painting of the beach. Or you can go back to Courbet in France, painted a painting like that of the, you can, and then you can go back to the beach again, so you can go in and out of different encounters. You can't do that when you're making a film, be it something like Lord of the Rings. You've got to, in the end, you've got to get the one ring or die. You've got to get into the mountain or not. You've got to bring it back. You've got to win. You've got to lose. There's got to be a narrative through the story. But the biggest thing as an artist is that you're not on your own anymore. I can make all my own decisions and my own mistakes, but you've got this huge bloody great film crew sitting behind you, and they're on, $50 or $80 an hour. And so if you fluff your lines and the sound person doesn't get it or whatever, it's like money's going down the gurgler flat out. You're very anxious. You got 10 days to do the whole thing. Whereas if I don't get a shoot, it doesn't matter with me. I'll just go back next week or next month. So there's an intensity of it. But the best part of it is it's collaborative. You get with people that know, and I've made some wonderful relationships, particularly with a photographer, cameraman called Alan Bollinger. He was Peter Jackson's left-hand camera or right-hand cameraman for years and did the filming in Heavenly Creatures, which I thought was some of the best filming that I'd seen in any film made in New Zealand. So him and I clicked. We really got on with each other and talked a lot about it because he was doing the moving sequence. I was doing the background and sort of scene set, because they do a lot of that filming with grey screens or blue screens or green screens, and they have my photographs in the background. So they're on site, but they're not. Anyway, Al and I would talk a lot about art, about what we're doing, and influence each other. And with the camera person and the units that when I was doing my TV programs, the sound and the camera person and me, there were three of us. And by the end, if we'd done a couple of months filming, we felt very much in tune with what would work with each other. That side of Craig's face works better than the other side if the light's shining down that way. And it's kind of like a weird sort of, you get into these very intense relationships at short periods of time. And I haven't seen Drew, the cameraman, for 20 years. He's back doing Shortland Street or something. But, there's an intensity, which is wonderful if you're an artist, that collaborative.
Yep. And here we are in the Craig Potton, the wonderful Craig Potton Gallery, here on Hardy Street, Nelson CBD. What can visitors expect when they walk through the door?
Well, I've pretty much said that if they don't find beauty, I've failed. And I mean that not just from my own work, but also from, and one of the great ideas when we started this gallery was that it wouldn't just be my work, but that it would be a place that people could come into and just kind of forget their daily life and ritual and everything else, and the worries and habits and everything else, and just come in and just see beautiful objects of art, be it as simple as we've got soaps over there, and I can just come and stick my head into a lemonwood soap and have great pleasure. And or I can come in and see a painting,
put on some jewelry. There's a wide range of
yes
here in the jewelry space. There's quite a bit. It is an interesting gallery. It's not just things on walls.
No, well, I tried one of them in Arrowtown, down in Queenstown region, Arrowtown, before I tried this. And it was just bang, my photographs, stark, normal, white cube gallery. And this time I thought, no, I want something that's almost a bit, lets you in a bit more gently. You don't just walk straight in and that's $2,000, that photograph, and walk out again. It's like you come in and you see a lot of objects at different price points. I'm getting quite specific now, that you can take away, and they can be an object of beauty for you for as long as you want them.
And also for those listeners that perhaps are not close by, the online as well. You've a lot of the products and some beautiful books online as well, if they want to browse around.
Yep. No, that is obviously, these days the big question around retail is how much do people want to, tangibly pick up the object and then, go home and talk about it and then order it online. We don't know even half the time. We sort of say, well, everything's going online. That's not quite true. I think what is happening is people come and they'll see a painting that they love, they'll go home, show their partner online, they'll talk about it, and then they'll order online, and we think, oh, that's an online order. But it might have been spurred by the fact that they've been through.
Come into the gallery.
Yeah, but we do get people from USA and from Europe in particular that will just, off the bat order online.
Yeah.
So it's a part of retail for absolute sure, and a part of sort of the global reach of product these days, I guess.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, Craig, we really appreciate your time. It's one of those podcasts where you think, well, we could do a few of these because you've got a massive history and background in not only photography, but your environmental work, your film work, but also we didn't even touch on the publishing, and that was a major part of your life as well. But we really appreciate your time, and especially hosting us in this beautiful gallery. And what's next for you? Any projects coming up that you're intrepid journeys somewhere?
Yep. No, I'm very involved at present, and probably exciting me as much as anything ever has, with Pete Butler, who's around the corner at his health post, but he's also Forest Herbs around the corner at Collingwood Street. And he's put his company's profits to a large extent behind a big project which we're doing, it feels, but right through to Whauriki Beach.
Oh, right.
And we've built a predator-free sanctuary for seabirds to come back from. They were on the coast here. All the predators ate them, and all the chicks and everything. They got stuck on the offshore islands. So we're bringing them back through that fence. We're also re-establishing wetlands, which is, of course, carbon sequestering.
Yep.
And another one which I'm up against the world of is I'm going to try and get 30% of Tasman Bay through my Forest and Bird. I'm chairman of the Forest and Bird branch in Nelson, fully protected in the ocean. We don't want to know about it, and this is not the time to talk about it a lot, but we're destroying the ocean. It's falling apart, it's acidifying, it's warming, we're overfishing, we're destroying the substrate under the ocean, etc. They're good people doing bad things, fishermen at present, and be they recreational or be they businesses. So I'm following the David Attenborough notion, which comes out of COP15, which is a United Nations agreement that we're about to sign, that we won't necessarily honour, but that is to protect 30% of our ocean. So I thought, well, why not start in Tasman Bay? We've got 4 national parks, if you count Marlborough Sounds. We've got 2 piddly little reserves, or 3 actually, marine reserves, which we created, Forest and Bird. Let's get serious about looking after it.
Right.
So, plenty to do.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah, I'm feeling tired now.
All right. Well, we really appreciate your time. And don't forget to come and check out the beautiful Craig Potton Gallery on Hardy Street, and also look online as well. Big thanks to Craig Potton for joining us today. Thanks for listening to Talk of the Town, and we'll be back soon for more stories from the Nelson CBD.
Thank you, Greg. Pleasure.